I help people change how they think about the future.
Okay.
Because when you change how you think about the future, it changes how you act in the present. Change doesn't happen as fast as we think. It often only feels fast because we're not paying attention. Helping people to feel a sense of agency, because when we do that, it widens the range of thinkable futures. Those with the least power to shape the future suffer its worst consequences. We make assumptions that those at the top of organisations will have the broadest perspective on what's changing. I would argue it's the other way around. That the future usually happens via the things that we consider to be ridiculous. We need to get in the arena and start practicing what we've intuitively always said. We intuitively know what things would serve us well and what things would probably not serve us well.
Welcome back to the second season of Rules Don't Apply, in partnership with our friends at South by Southwest Sydney. Once again, we're bringing raw, unfiltered conversations with the thinkers and troublemakers, rewriting what success looks like. Because the future doesn't belong to those who play it safe. It belongs to those who play it differently. Ladies and gentlemen of South by Southwest, if you are in the gallery, pop on over to our live recording stage of Rules Don't Apply. We are joined by the fabulous Reanna Browne. Reanna, for those that don't know, is a futurist, a strategist, and an unapologetic systems thinker, which I can now absolutely confirm. She helps leaders design for what's next, not just to react to what's now. She's the director of Work Futures. She's at the forefront of exploring how time, technology, and power dynamics are reshaping the way that we live and work. But your real gift, Reanna, lies in making complex futures tangible. Part philosopher, part provocateur, which I love. You are redefining what it means to work well, live intentionally, and lead with hope. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right, so Reanna, I invite you over for dinner, and my 8-year-old daughter, who is notorious for unashamedly asking questions, comes and asks, "What do you do?" What's your answer to her?
Do you know, that just reminded me, a friend said to me once, "You are my most and least favourite dinner guest." And I thought that was such a rude thing to say. And then secondly, I thought that's a really cool way to describe a good futurist, actually. So part of it is, how can we talk about the change that's really exciting? You know, the stuff that everyone wants to see more of, but how can we also reckon with some of the realities that we're facing? And that's, to her, the bad dinner guest. But someone's bad dinner guest might also be a good dinner guest. But if I was to respond to your daughter, I think I'd say I do a couple of things. So firstly, I help people change how they think about the future.
Okay.
Because when you change how you think about the future, it changes how you act in the present. The second thing I do is to help people make sense of change so that they can act. You know, I think good futures work is about change. It's not managing it. It's looking at what's changing around us, but it should be in service of action and widening choices available to us today.
I mean, then what are the signals, what are the things that you're paying attention to right now that we should be alert to?
There's a few things. I like that as a question too, because if futurists never like to get pinned down in a specific moment. I'm interested in a couple of things. Firstly, health.
Okay. What about health?
There's fundamental changes that are happening in health, and we can't escape it. So I'm doing some work at the moment with an organisation, and we're looking at the future of work, and I keep saying we have to centre health in that conversation.
Yep.
And a really good example is, let's just think about our workforce. Who we think our workers are not who we think they are. So I think in Australia, at least 50% of people have a chronic illness. You overlay mental health. You overlay caring responsibilities, you overlay women's health, you overlay disability. Who is at work and the experiences and the needs that they have is fundamentally different who we used to think was at work. So the way in which we think about how we design work, how we reward work, I think needs to fundamentally change. There's something really interesting going on too around work. I think it's becoming a setting where we're starting to recognise at the aggregate, at the population level, that it's contributing to poor health outcomes, and it's also a setting for population health changes. So the spillover effect, where we used to talk about work separately from health and your mental health and your physical health, And now we're starting to talk about that inside work. Younger workers are expecting workplaces to provide health infrastructure for their mental health. And you think about the convergence of challenges that we're having around mental health alongside access to those things in the system. And so people are looking to workplaces to respond to some of these things. So I think I centre health in everything I do because I don't know how we don't. I centre health in the context of AI technology, digital technologies. Probably another thing I'm paying attention to is this rise of AI companionship and relationships. I mean, this is bad dinner guest stuff, where we're seeing the rise of, it's very early signals, AI-induced psychosis. I think there's a psychiatrist that's written a piece from the US to saying he's seeing numbers of patients now coming in presenting with AI-induced psychosis. There was an example in Australia of an AI-assisted suicide of a young kid. And this is very bad dinner guest, but we need to talk about this stuff, right? So health is very central for me, and I use that as the lens to explore a whole variety of other things. I think also we can't talk about anything in life without talking about climate. So that is a conversation and a reality that's in here and now. We're talking about, I'm looking at climate migration that's already starting. We're looking at climate gentrification that's starting, where people are moving from beachside homes and it's changing suburb dynamics. We're looking at it, from a health perspective. I studied a master's in futures and spent some time in Finland, and this was years ago, and they were talking to me, someone was a teacher, and she's saying we're already focused on climate anxiety because it's presenting in schools. So they are in here and now kind of dilemmas. Very bad dinner guest. I told you I gave myself permission at the start.
We're non-discriminatory at our dinner.
I have to train myself to find hopeful signals as much as I do. So there's a default position there. And there are some really cool things that are happening. But I feel personally we're not talking enough about the stuff that we need to reckon with. And then I think my job as a futurist is to help people get agency and pathways.
Other side of the coin, what are the signals that we're all looking at that are distracting us from those things that we should be talking about?
I mean, this is probably a hot, controversial take, but I think AI and digital technology it's both a technology and an ideology. And I find it increasingly hard to untangle what part are we talking about. Like, there are some amazing things that are happening in that space, which is really exciting, especially in the health sector. At the same time, there is a lot of hot air. And I tend to say to people, though, in a way it doesn't matter because we'll act based on the perceptions anyway. But yeah, I find that whole conversation, I try to kind of move from taking a particular side on that and saying that both exist.
When you say AI is both a technology and an ideology, what do you mean by an ideology?
Just like a whole belief system.
As to, whether or not it's going to be net positive, net negative, or somewhere in between, or?
Well, I think we can have a hard tech bro angle to those things and how central it is to our flourishing and a whole kind of belief system that sits behind centering of this technology that promises a whole variety of things. And then at the same time, it is a technology that's being executed and doing some profound things. It's really hard to untangle between when is it what. Yeah,
that was going to be my next question. As someone that has to support organisations navigate these tectonic shifts, how do you identify what's signal and what's noise?
Yeah, it's a nice question. I mean, part of the job for me is helping people shift away from the belief that we have to get the future precisely right. So when you do that, the approach to looking at what's changing, I think, shifts. It's less about prediction. I always say that prediction is one way to navigate the future and uncertainty. I just don't think it's really a useful one. It reduces our sense of agency to act in the present, because the future never arrives because we are always in the present. So I always talk about my work as how can I help people create a good present, because that's how we create a better future. Part of the job is to how do we cut through the noise and appreciate that change changes. I had a farmer once said to me that he feels like it's a fire hydrant in his face in terms of what's going on in their world. Part of the job, I think, is to talk about what are the changes that are consequential and impactful for me. What have a high impact? So one way of thinking about it is impact or opportunity. The other way, I think, is to pay attention to how change changes. So I might start looking at something and thinking that could be really consequential, that could have a big impact. But I'm just going to keep careful watch.
Yeah.
Like, we don't have to react evenly to every single change. The other thing I'd say too is that change doesn't happen as fast as we think.
Okay.
I think it often only feels fast because we're not paying attention. And I also think it feels fast because that's the story that gets told to us a lot. It's fast, fast, fast. You can't do anything about it. What do? You just go back and doom scroll or look at, AI cat videos or whatever. For me, I really push back to say that change isn't as fast as we think if we are paying attention.
I want to talk about the dilation of time, and because you often talk about time being a design material, and how does scarcity and urgency shape both our best and our worst decisions in your mind?
That's a really powerful question, I think, and it came up in the conversation I had on a panel yesterday around play. So for me, I know firsthand that your ability to be regulated and feel safe is directly linked to your ability to think more imaginatively. So the more dysregulated, we know it intuitively, the more panicked we are, the more we close in on our sense of possibility. So part of my job is helping people to feel a sense of agency, because when we do that, it widens the range of thinkable futures, and that is consequential. Tony Fry has this phrase, and I think it's really compelling for the time that we're in. He calls it defuturing. This sense that we are closing in on what we believe is possible, and that's really consequential. I always say that the future doesn't actually exist. There are no future facts, as Jim Data says, because it hasn't actually happened yet. So when we're talking about the future, all we're talking about is two things. Either ideas and images that people have about the future, or data on what's changing now and what's changed. That's
and then
the
projecting
only
that
two
out
bits.
with a probability.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So my provocation is to say, whose images are they? Who gets to talk about the future of farming? Who gets to talk about the future of work? And Nab Jane has a beautiful quote. She says, those with the least power to shape the future suffer its worst consequences. And for me, some of the most powerful advocacy is for us to start questioning those images of the future, because it hasn't happened yet. I had this conversation once with farmers, and I was showing them some just standard images of the future, like Google Pics 101. And there was an audible gasp in the room. And the realization was that they were in none of those photos. Those photos were farming that was hyper-tech with no people in them. And there was just a sense in the room, where are we in this conversation? And the realization that some of the advocacy needs to be saying, whose future? I talk about this, the politics of the future. Those with the loudest voice get to shape what we think it is, and that's something I'm really agitating, that we start having more questions around. Says who?
It's such a fascinating dynamic, but you were saying our projections of the future then shape it, because you start to converge on this perception that we manufacture to be a reality. So as an organization, how do you provide the antidote to that? Is it simply just making sure that all voices are in the room, that you're platforming those unheard voices, or is there something a bit more important beyond that?
I think diversity is critical. We make assumptions that those at the top of organisations will have the broadest perspective on what's changing. I would argue it's the other way around. The further up in an organisation, usually the more narrow view. So I think it's consequential that we have people across the business, outside of the business, kids, really hold space for a future generation. Sometimes when I'm doing work, I'll literally have a chair with a face on it that's saying, this is future generations, and we need to hold space for that in this conversation. So opening that up. But I'd also say the acupuncture point is blowing open how we think about the future in the first place.
Okay, in what way? What would
So
you do?
giving people a sense of agency, that it's not preordained, it hasn't happened, there's no future facts, that the future usually happens via the things that we consider to be ridiculous. I always say the story of the future is, that's ridiculous, that will never happen. Then I hear, oh, okay, it's happening, but that's a Silicon Valley thing, or that's a public sector thing. And then I hear, oh, that's normal, we've always been doing it that way. So allowing people to hold space, the future hasn't happened, it's probably ridiculous to us. The only time that makes sense to us is the present. If you look back in the past, you're like, I can't believe we used to ...
Yeah.
Like, you do a little exercise of looking at your first Facebook post and you think, oh, I'm like a maniac, like a political kind of maniac that I don't recognize now. So the past is ridiculous, the future will feel ridiculous. And I share that because it gives people permission to think more broadly, that if you have a different perspective, that it's actually critical. Also hold attention that some people's utopia is some people's dystopia.
So what? Let's make this practical for those that are listening. If I want to best prepare myself for all of these very many presents that may or may not eventuate, what's the muscle that I need to train right now? What do I do in terms of building the strongest toolkit to optimize for the very many futures that are never going to happen because they're always the present?
I mean, there's the recognition, this was really powerful for me, that the future happens via our action, but also our inaction. So the more times we ignore what's going on around us, the more likely a future of constraint where we don't have a choice.
Okay.
So that acknowledgement is really helpful. The other thing I would say is holding space that we have to keep the lights on. You have to do your current job, you have to run the current business, and think about what's changing at the same time. And then we have to think about small actions. So I'm really obsessed with this idea of small bets in a long game.
Okay.
So getting people to, make sense, getting people to think about what's changing around me. I have a little 3 strikes rule. The third time I hear something, I start paying attention.
Okay.
Then asking the questions, so what? What does that mean for me? Like, is it interesting or is it actually important? What are the consequences? And then saying, now what? What might I do come Monday? And I'm really big on this sense of, it doesn't matter if you are trying to fundamentally change a system or make small incremental adjustments, even in your own life.
Yep.
Both require you to start from the near term and take the next move. So small actions are really consequential. I became a futurist because I had a coffee with someone 15 years ago, not because I had a grand plan and tried to imagine the perfect job. It was to sit down and say, I find that really interesting. It was to have a shared, I always talk about a direction of travel. Like, what do I want to see more of and less of in my life? Don't worry about trying to get the future precisely right.
Yeah.
Don't worry about what job, what perfect business outcome. Have a conversation in your organisation too. It's really powerful. What are the stories that we want to see more of and less of? And then we come back to the present and say, what is changing now and what are our next moves? What's our next right move from where we are?
So if I'm a leader in a large organisation and I've got people within my duty of care that are grappling with this, increasingly pervasive sense of overwhelm, especially coming off the back of, a week like South by Southwest. As a leader, what can I do to cultivate, that future readiness or that present readiness in my team?
I mean, I think part of it, again, is challenging how the future happens, how change happens. Paying attention to what's important and versus what's interesting. Asking, so what, now what? But the other thing I think is having a different perspective on change. So when we're thinking about complex change or a complex setting where there's no single right answer, there's no root cause.
Yeah.
It's like multiple hypotheses and arguments about why this certain thing is happening. We actually have to act our way through the uncertainty. And we spend so much time doing perfect plans. I know this because I have this characteristic, thinking I can control the future when really we just need to work on a sufficient amount of information and then do the next right thing. And then from there you get a bit more information, then you do the next right thing, and then all of a sudden you end up somewhere else. So how we respond to change when it feels overwhelming is really consequential, and acting our way safely and in small increments through that change is absolutely kind of life-changing personally,
Yep.
but really helpful in organisations. It's like, what's our small bets in the long game? What's a small safe to fail thing that we can do come Monday, where the job is just to learn a bit more about this overwhelming thing that we're trying to respond to?
Which I find is, look, I think is profoundly insightful, because so many strategies are future state back, and all of this work is put into a false sense of certainty as to where the organisation will be and what we're going to do to get there, versus current state forward and constant refinement and innovation from current state toward an opaque future.
With an anchoring and a sense of direction.
Yeah.
And I think that's the critical part. That's why I say the job isn't to try and get the future precisely right, where we have 20 people in a room arguing over what the future is, and then we just force a consensus, and then everyone, the job is to find shared directionality, and then to come back to the present and say, what is the next right move? And how can insights about what's changing actually widen the choices available to us? It's not just about mitigating threat. Good futures work helps us say what's changing now, not speculative, like where are they? I call it the adjacent present.
Okay.
Where are there things that are already happening at the edge of today, and how does that either widen the choice, help us make a more resilient choice, help us think totally differently about a decision, and then act from there?
From the work that you do, what role does unlearning play in all of this? I can imagine organisations are wedded to the way that things have always been done. Executives, have the burden of success, right? What got them to where they are might not get them to where they're going. And I'm curious how where does unlearning come in, and how do you foster a culture of unlearning or a mindset of malleability in all of this?
When I first got into the futures field, I remember having, it was a client, we were working in sport, and I thought, I'm just going to do the best research possible on what's changing, and it will be obvious what we need to do. And we got into the conversation, and the CEO said to me, well, I hope you're ready for like argy-bargy. And I said, why? And he said, well, not to typecast roles. He said, the head of finance is going to say, we cannot do anything different. And the head of, I think it was like strategy and innovation, will say, if we don't do anything different, we won't have a business. And for me, that was such a powerful realization that it didn't matter what evidence of change or trends I had in front of me. The acupuncture point was to challenge how they think about the future in the first place. So the shift in perspective was to say, you're both right. We have to run the business and change the business at the same time, because the future never arrives. We used to think like, short, medium, long term, and we'll eventually get to those long. No, we don't. Spoiler alert, we never get to those things. So unlearning those things, I think, that lock us into a way of navigating uncertainty and change is really powerful. So there was like an exhale in the room where they're like, oh, we're both right. And so how do we do both? How do we recognize that we need to grow the new inside the old? You need to think about your new career, next job, inside the same time you're doing your current thing. And what are the steps that allow us to keep the lights on and think about what's changing in our lives or in our organisations? And I think that's a big part of what I do. Challenging how we think about change. We intuitively know. I mean, you gave that great example of, we do this long 10-year kind of plan, and it's like, oh, but Brian left, and now no one cares about this thing over here. Or, oh, we don't have budget for that. Yeah. So for me, it's like, it doesn't mean we don't lift our gaze beyond today. That's very consequential. But we do it with an anchor of shared directionality. We come back to the present, and we then make our next right moves. And we use insight about what's changing to widen those moves.
You're big on really leaving organisations, teams with agency. So I want to ask you a couple of questions. The first one is, I leave after a week of having my mind blown with big ideas at South by Southwest Sydney, and I get to Monday and I'm overwhelmed with possibility. What would be the 3 things that I can do starting Monday that are going to set me up for success, to give me agency in this infinite permutation of presence?
I mean, I go back to the 3 strikes rule. I think it's like, where there are 3 things.
Listen to something and the third time listen?
Yeah, it's like, that's the 3rd time I've heard, a couple of years ago about this idea of AI psychosis. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start paying attention. Filter through the lens of, well, what are those changes that have the most kind of impact for me? And then what are my next moves? What is the one small thing that I can do kind of come Monday? I know that feeling, even as a futurist, of sitting in a room and hearing all these insights about what's changing and then going home and feeling just like existential
dread.
Crisis.
Yeah.
So my job is to kind of break it down. Not all change is in here and evenly distributed. Some of those things might be out there and then they might be speculative. I'd also say kind of try and learn a bit more about what's going on.
Especially if it scares you.
Yeah.
Are there habits or rituals that, in your line of work that you do, as you're ravenously drinking from the proverbial fire hydrant, to help with understanding those signals, with, questioning the veracity and what does it mean to me? Are there little habits that you would recommend to those that might be just embarking on this journey towards preparedness?
I have to also train myself to look for really hopeful signals of change.
Okay.
Get off the internet can be really helpful.
Okay.
And just get out in the real world, speaking to people. So I think looking for signals of hope is a really powerful thing.
What makes you hopeful right now?
Well, it's a big question in my bad dinner guest phase at the moment.
I thought I'd pull you out of bad dinner guest into good dinner guest.
Thank you. Some signals that come to mind are, again, a strange answer perhaps, of seeing some early pockets of young people choosing to go offline, seeing growing resistance, seeing workers pushing back against punishing kind of algorithmic conditions, the gig workers, for instance.
Yeah.
Watching a great example of gig workers using the algorithm playfully to accept higher value rides. Like watching all these little experiments of people actually advocating and pushing back, I find that really hopeful.
Yeah.
And again, it's your utopia might be my dystopia, but watching people sit back and say, I don't want defuturing, I don't want to slide into the future. That's not a future I want to inhabit. And watching how we're starting to have conversations around that. I find that really hopeful.
I'll give you your bad dinner guest moment as well. What's the thing that's sucking the wind from your sails right now in terms of the signals that you're seeing?
Surveillance.
Ooh, what do you mean by that? I'm curious.
We have just slid into a world of very pervasive surveillance. During the pandemic, bossware technology, so the technology, that tracks if you're online, if you're offline, that you spoke to Kevin 5 times this week, the geocaching that follows you went up exponentially. And it happened by slide. I always say that future happens usually in really boring ways. It's
like the frog in the pot.
Yeah. We don't go through gates where we say, is this okay? Do we want this? It just, through our inaction in society, we just arrive somewhere else. And I don't know if we're asking enough questions around surveillance. I take the health angle and the health and safety angle here. Like, we've now seen a work cover claim where someone was saying the surveillance at work has created anxiety and it's resulted in a work cover claim. There are more pervasive uses of these algorithmic management. I call it like little tech, all the little workforce management tech that actually monitors and tracks all of the things that you do. Whether the organisation is benevolent and cares about that or not, it doesn't matter, it's here. Are now doing things like, we call it surveillance wages. So almost like dynamic wages based on whether you were online for long enough, or there's some really dystopian things. And what encourages me is people starting to ask questions, people starting to come together to say, that's not a future I want to inhabit. People starting to play and push back with the rules. There's a real kind of advocacy piece coming out, I think, in the thread of this conversation, but it's cool. I find that really inspiring, where we're just saying, that's just hashtag crap futures. The kids don't use hashtags anymore, but it's that sentiment of like, no, that's not a future I want to be a part of.
And what advice would you give to the parents and grandparents with us tuning in, right? You know, I've got a young, now 9-year-old daughter and a 6-year-old son. And I'm sure similarly, off the back of the big ideas this week, you're grappling with this tension of, to what we've been discussing, do I plunge into AI with my children, or do I withhold, do I plunge into these technologies? What's the right balance of digital or analog? And what advice would you give to me as a young father, or not so young father, but, or grandparents who are watching out for their children's children in terms of setting themselves up for success in the many presents?
I think I'm going to say a non-obvious answer.
I love non-obvious answers.
For me, it comes right back to things like, how do you help your kids balance their nervous system?
Yep.
In a time of increasingly dysregulated, kind of at an aggregate level, dysregulated societies, I think it goes back to this, for years we've been talking about, well, we need human skills, and these are all the soft skill things.
It's funny that the soft skills are now the most relevant skills.
Yeah, but we need to get in the arena with that. We intuitively know it. We know that there's a whole bunch of de-skilling going on around AI. I'm so glad I went to school when it wasn't around, to be honest, because I know I would have used all of those hacks the whole time. But I would say, and I don't mean this as like a pop thing, those innate human abilities to adapt and sense make and respond and regulate your nervous system are becoming more consequential than ever. I think nervous system regulation should be a part of any CEO's carrier bag of capabilities. But we need to, people have been saying for years we need some of these things, but I do not see it show up in the system. I do not see it show up in, well, actually, are we really recruiting people for their critical thinking? No, it's because they've got these 5 kind of tech skills in background. Like, we need to get in the arena and start practicing what we've intuitively always said.
And do you think that there's that sort of the inconvenient truth of all of this, and the mismanagement of it is what's driving the massive uptake in chronic illness and depression and anxiety and, neurodiversity, and that we're seeing these signals, but is it too long a bow that we're just not addressing it?
In what way?
So I hear you talk about emotional regulation, and it rings really true, right? We're not doing a good enough job of helping our kids stay in sort of a discovery mode, to use Jonathan Haidt's sort of philosophy from the anxious generation, that we're constantly in defense mode, right? From when we're really, really little, and that our inability to address this and to help them is actually what's driving all of these, this expansion of chronic illness and chronic depression in our younger Australians, our younger audiences.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I share that not as a professional in this space, I share it as someone with lived experience.
Yeah, okay.
For me, this was the conversation in our play session of having a couple of years of really serious mental health issues. And moving away from the pathologizing and seeing that as just chronic nervous system dysregulation, which led to both anxiety and depression at the same time, kind of paradoxically. It's like, how could they both coexist? It's like, of course they do, because I'm in such a chronic state of stress and panic. All the physical downstream dilemmas that came from that became very consequential then for the next 10 years. So the reason I share that about parents is not to trivialize, it's to 2 things. One, trying to move away from we've got to get the future precisely right and guess what it is, and then therefore tell our kids to code or not code, or remember the future doesn't happen as fast as we think. We've got time to do the thing and then respond. The other is that I just personally fundamentally believe that an acupuncture point is how we navigate a population level of dysregulated nervous systems in a time where that I think is only, it shows up in extreme mental health statistics, which is reaching a significant tipping point for me.
And we've got all the evidence in the world, and it's becoming this sort of glaringly obvious crisis that we continue to not deal with.
Not to reduce this down, but I often feel in my own self and society, we know enough to act. We intuitively know what things would serve us well and what things would probably not serve us well. I don't know if we necessarily need more information. It goes back to this thing of mental health being a complex issue, multiple hypotheses. There is no right answer, but we need to act our way through that. We need to try different things. And this is why I'm just personally, the nervous system thing was very consequential for me in my life.
I think that's a great answer. I think that for any parent listening in, that should be the nucleus of what we focus on. That and raising kind children. I think kindness is the other thing that's in short supply. And you and I were talking about this before.
I mean, that's where our conversation around play went. We were talking about, for me, I didn't research my way into play. I kind of just, play became a somewhat survival technique to get me into my body safely and a whole bunch of things. So how does play, when you're thinking about your own children, allow for nervous system regulation? I think you're interviewing Dr. Kate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to have a chat with her.
And I just think it's so consequential how we spend time, again, acupuncture point, playing with children and how critical that is in regulating our nervous systems. But at the aggregate, a regulated nervous system is, and play is very helpful in getting us there, is a critical physiological infrastructure for creativity and imagination.
It's good for everybody. It's good for business.
Exactly.
It's good for families. It's good for yourself.
Yeah, again, but we know it. We intuitively, we know this stuff. We just got to back ourselves in.
I'm going to end this phenomenally insightful chat with 5 quick-fire questions. First thought wins, Reanna. What's one hot take you believe about what's to come that no one agrees with?
I mean, the thing I first thought about then was an interesting thing that's happening is there's a lot of private truths around AI. So I would go to a lot of conversations and speak with a lot of leaders, and what they say and then what they say to me personally are often two very different things.
You're not the first person to say that.
Okay, all right.
So
that's
the evangelist.
Public lies, private truths, and again, not evenly distributed. Don't come at me on social media like I'm an advocate of the technology, but I think we're just in this messy middle, and messy middle is characterized by complexity. It's like no right answer. It feels chaotic, and it is also contradictory. That's just implicit in where we are in the messy middle. So yeah.
What's the most important thing you've let go of?
We can't control the future. We can't know the future.
I love that coming from a futurist saying we can't know the future.
I know. I mean, I think I studied a master's in foresight because my hypervigilant, anxious self thought if only I can know all the things and a methodology about knowing all the things that are going to change, then I won't feel so worried about it. That program did the opposite.
Yeah.
And the letting go of someone, letting go of the idea that we can control the future, the notion of predict and control is not serving us well. We're in a world of sense and respond. And
it's
that
a fool's
was
errand.
That was a big reckoning. So when people say to me, well, what will the future be? I try and encourage, it's not about trying to get the future precisely right. Sure, I look at change and how it might unfold, but that needs to be in service of making decisions now.
Yeah.
Don't reduce our agency by saying we just got to guess the right thing and then we'll know the right thing to do, which was exactly how I operated.
Yeah.
Then I studied, totally blew everything up, and I had to just slowly put my brain, my whole being back together.
I love the sort of current state forward juxtaposition.
Yeah.
What do you want written on your gravestone?
I think, strangely, the first thing that comes to mind, and I'll regret this later, is kind of awkward, but kind.
All right. What's one rule you secretly wish you hadn't broken?
Just generally, any rule.
Yeah, you get to choose your own adventure.
This is a strange angle, but it's the first thing that came to mind is the rule between my mind and my body.
I really want to follow up a question on that, but I'm going to respect the answer. What question are you most tired of being asked?
Prediction and AI. So what will happen around X? Tell me the future of X. No.
I think you've given us a lot of compelling evidence as to why that is not a constructive approach.
I mean, it's one way to navigate the future. Yeah. The question is that serving us well? Is it a useful way? Does it diminish our agency to act in the present? I think so.
I love that. And on that note, I will thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Reanna Browne.
Thank you. Thank you
so much for joining us.
My pleasure.